Heute! Good Lord, Laura. Laura Palmer.
Laura Palmer was an 18-year-old high school student. She lived with her parents, Leland and Sarah Palmer, in the Pacific Northwest town of Twin Peaks. Laura seemed to be living an ideal life with great friends, a hunky boyfriend, a family, and a community that knew, loved, and respected her. But the facade of tranquility and peace was nothing but a mask shielding the world's eyes from darkness. Twin Peaks began with a dead girl found on a lonely riverside in mid-February. The corpse was that of Laura Palmer, homecoming queen, town darling, honor student, and now victim number 2 of a vicious serial killer. Everyone was stunned to learn of her death. It was a mortal blow not just to her but to the town itself. Twin Peaks' own image was found in Laura's face, and they felt something innocent and good was lost about all of them that day. Everyone in town knew Laura, and all saw something special, unique, and precious beyond her and themselves. Laura struggled most of her life with being an icon to others. Something they saw as pure about themselves and her. How could this girl be found dead in a ditch somewhere? Laura's mysteries were swiftly unraveled by Dale Cooper, a brilliant agent sent in to investigate by the FBI. Cooper and his forensics team soon learned that Laura had a serious drug addiction to cocaine and that she had sex with multiple men on the night of her death. Everything seemed to be unraveling quickly for the innocent high school honor student. But how did this happen? Cooper spends most of the show trying to answer that question, and above all, who killed her and why? Laura was born on July 22, 1971, into the prosperous upper-middle-class Palmer household. Her father, Leland, was a lawyer. Her mother kept a well-appointed suburban home. Laura had close friends with her cousin Maddie and a local girl named Donna Hayward. Her early childhood was fairly normal, until her 12th birthday. That was the night she first encountered the strange creature known as Bob. There's a kind of evil in the woods of Twin Peaks, a strange force beyond the ken of human understanding, but not beneath our notice. Most people ignore the ugliness hovering on the edge of their nightmares. A hideous animal kind of lust, violence, and pure appetite, living only to parasitize on human beings, break them, cause them to live in fear, and swallow their souls. The beast Bob used every vile act imaginable upon her adolescent frame. Laura was targeted on the cusp of womanhood and never the same afterwards.
There are repeated references to a Bob. He was a threatening presence in her life from early adolescence. There are intimations of abuse and molestation on a regular basis.
From that moment on, she began leading a double life. One Laura remained in the waking world, the daylight world of Twin Peaks, an honor student with close friends and a loving family. The perfect life, the American dream life of suburbia since the 1940s. On the other side was the real Laura, a desperate, despairing victim struggling to survive the most harrowing violence imaginable. That double version of Laura made her interactions with others confusing and difficult. For both her and others, she blew hot and cold about friendship, love, and life. A magnet that could reverse polarity on a dime. Who was the real Laura? The one who loved her friends, family, and town? Or the minor criminal who did hard drugs, led her friends astray, and gave up on everything but her own destruction? Her repeated rapes and assault at the hands of her tormentor had left her empty and broken inside. The abuse was more than physical. Bob tried to shatter her emotionally as well, to break her down and crush her soul until she hated herself as well. She didn't care if she lived or died, and came in the end to death as a kind of release from suffering. Laura sought help at times, comfort in the arms of her lovers, talking to a mysterious writer named Harold Smith, and even getting some psychiatric treatment from the local shrink. To some degree, her drug use is said to be a form of self-medication common in mental illness sufferers, and could be seen as a positive step towards abandoning nihilistic despair. But she never told her loved ones about the killer Bob haunting her, and the ones she did tell, like Harold, did not believe her. The hard drugs she turned to ease the pain also made it impossible to distinguish between nonsensical ramblings and the dark inner truth of her life. Laura had no illusions about receiving any help or assistance from a world she saw increasingly as cold and bleak.
Do you think that if you were falling in space, that you would slow down after a while or go faster and faster? Faster and faster. And for a long time you wouldn't feel anything. angels wouldn't help you. Because they've all gone away.
Laura's suicidal tendencies began to manifest a few years into her ordeal. Like many abuse victims, she self-medicated with self-harm. Simply surviving the trauma of assault was not enough. She wanted to regain bodily autonomy by being violent to herself. Ironically doing much the same harm that Bob was doing merely to show that she was in charge of what was done to her own flesh. Laura took drugs, hung around with criminals, went to wild parties, all to feed something inside of her. A powerful desire to test fate and walk on the edge of a knife. Most confusing to her and others was her attitude towards sex. In sex, most of all, she wanted to recover control over her own body and sexual needs after Bob's acts. Laura was desperate to create good memories, to seize control of her sex life so Bob wouldn't be the only thing in it, so she rushed into sex early. When she was 13, she and a friend went out with older boys and ended up skinny dipping in a local river. Even though the age of the boys made the event seem a little seedy, Laura had a wonderful time. She felt powerful and sexy and in command for the first time, and she instantly wanted to re-experience that feeling. Bob did not merely hurt her at night. He was a fearsome presence haunting her footsteps and an intrusive thought drilling into her brain. Sex became a ritual to banish the intrusive thoughts of Bob, his insults and his violence crushing her down. The sex she had was also often rough, involving strangers, bondage, and masochism.
Hey, remember that mystery man I told you about? Well, if I tell you his name, then you're gonna be in trouble. He wouldn't be such a mystery man anymore, but you might be history man. I think a couple of times he's tried to kill me. But guess what? As you know, I sure got off on it. Isn't sex weird? This guy can really light my F-I-R-E. His in red Corvette.
Laura enjoyed being hurt, being tied up, and feeling pain. Was this a residual desire left over because violence and harm were her first introduction to sex as a young girl? She has an innate yearning to be tied up, hit, and used by men. Instead of being repulsed by similar abusive behavior, she was turned on by it. As long as it was voluntary, she was excited to be treated in the same brutal manner sexually that Bob treated her against her will. As long as it was her choice, that's all that mattered. She found a boyfriend named Bobby Briggs. Bobby was a bad boy and minor criminal who would get Laura her new favorite thing, cocaine. Coke became a major part of her day-to-day life. She used again and again, getting higher and higher. Her addiction led her to meet drug dealers Leo Johnson and Jacques Renault. Both were hardened criminals with long rap sheets and violent tendencies. Laura began joining them and others for rounds of violent sex deep in the woods. Laura was so depressed she didn't care that Leo's penchant for rough sex sometimes crossed a line. Laura's drug habit grew worse, and soon she was being pimped out by Jacques Renault for extra cash. She even went to work at a brothel Benjamin Horne owned in Canada. She was kicked out of One-Eyed Jack's for excessive drug use. She couldn't even keep it together long enough to stay a week there. Laura came to realize how much power her sexuality gave her. She was so used to Bob breaking her down and hurting her, it must have been a profound moment when she twisted sex into something that could make her feel strong and manipulative. She's surrounded by the longing men feel for her. They exclude and ignore their own families sometimes, or their lives, just to be around her to have and use. Even Benjamin Horne, after he slept with her at his brothel, would ignore his own daughter in favor of Laura.
Why is it so easy to make men like me? And I don't even have to try very hard. Maybe if it was harder.
It was a double-edged sword to have it around her all the time, knowing they were always looking at her, always wanting her. But she also enjoyed the power it gave her, the feeling of using them as they used her. Her sexuality was twisted, strange, and a serious danger to her physical well-being. But it was also the best place for her to feel that she, not her abuser, was in control. Laura is a very intelligent young woman. She easily seems to be the intellectual equal or superior to the men in her life. In fact, she explicitly mocks both Bobby and James for being stupid. Laura enjoys lording it over the boys like that. And even grown men like the dim-witted Leo and Jock could be controlled by her. She seemed to enjoy being better and smarter than the men she was with, yet perversely enjoyed being dominated and hurt by them. Perhaps it was the appropriate level of danger. She wanted to be hurt, but also be able to manipulate her lovers easily. It may easily have been all part of Bob's plan. In order to reclaim her identity after the rape, she became manipulative and cruel herself, setting Laura up to eventually take on the evil spirit of Bob. At times, Laura tried to abandon her wildness and settle down to lead a normal life. But everyday existence bored her to tears. Fear drove her to normalcy. but ennui inevitably sent her back into wildness. She stayed on the straight and narrow for the longest after meeting James Hurley. James was a good and innocent biker kid. For a time, the schizophrenic Laura fell back into something of a normal life. James helped her quit drugs and avoid prostituting herself. This only lasted for a couple of months, though. She was truly in love with James, unlike her tempestuous relationship with Bobby and lustful encounters with Leo and Jacques. There may have been something between them, and she might have been able to make something last between the two. But the call of the wild side was too strong for Laura.
God, James is sweet, but he's so dumb. And right now, I can only take so much of sweet.
True love seemed to blossom between the two, but Laura cheated on him repeatedly and insulted and mocked him in public and private. She knew James was trying to save her, but refused to let him. In her secret diary, Laura wished again and again to be able to treat the boy she loves with respect and kindness. She'd almost given up at that point.
Quit trying to hold on so tight. I'm gone. Long gone. Like a turkey in the corn.
Ultimately, James couldn't help her. Laura had long ago given up hope and become lost in those woods again, as she said. Addicted to drugs, to sadomasochism, she surrendered her life to the forces around her. James was devastated, but Laura managed to throw him off just before her murder to spare James's life. She used him, loved him, needed him, and discarded him. None of the people in her life could hold on to Laura because they were too much in their own worlds. In one, there was Leo and Jacques, entirely in the criminal sphere, and on the other was James and Donna, too far gone into goodness and light. Laura had one foot in each world, one light, the other dark. If James was to be perfect for her and pull her out completely, or try to, he would likely just become involved in the darkness himself like Bobby Briggs did. Another important force for good in her life was her best friend, Donna. They had been friends since childhood and made a very serious pact as children to remain friends forever, no matter what. Donna was also intelligent, but more reserved and could barely understand Laura's troubles and behavior. Laura enjoyed drinking cocktails, smoking, and behaving self-consciously more adult. Donna went along with Laura's wildness to a point. Laura was bringing Donna down with her, sinking her into a life of prostitution and drug use. In a pivotal moment close to her death, Laura returns to selling her body to men. Donna secretly follows her and insists on joining her wayward friend. Initially, Laura complies, dutifully bringing Donna along and somewhat sullenly allowing her to participate. Just as Donna is about to have sex with some of the men, Laura is sent into a panic. She rages and screams about how terrible it is to see Donna wearing Laura's own sweater. Laura sees part of herself on Donna and understands she is being dragged down to Laura's level. She hastily gets Donna out of there before anything goes wrong. Like James, Donna loved Laura and wanted to save her, but she never got close enough. Laura could feel that her lifestyle was causing everyone around her to sink down to an uglier, meaner, grimmer level.
She said people tried to be good, but they were really sick and rotten, her most of all. And every time she tried to make the world a better place, something terrible came up inside her and pulled her back down into hell.
She was an enabler. She made Bobby do terrible things, kill people, sell drugs, and put his life in danger, just to feed her addiction. She almost made her best friend into something like a prostitute. The more James and Dr. Jacoby knew about Leo and Bob, the closer they came to being murdered themselves.
Well, we were in the woods, and she started saying this scary poem over and over about fire. And then she said, "Would you like to play with fire, little boy? Would you like to play with Bob? Would you like to play with Bob?"
It was near her death when Laura realized the most horrifying thing of all, that Bob was not merely hurting her, using her, or trying to destroy her. The dark spirits of the woods were trying to infest her. Bob is a parasite who moves between hosts, slowly eating away at your conscience, until you have nothing left of your soul. Laura, far from being merely a victim, began to drag others around her into an orbit of sin. Her insatiable drive for cocaine led Bobby Briggs to murder at least one man, and she insulted and broke down James Hurley, the man she professed to love. Laura was shocked that she one day might become Bob, that she would be host to his evil, to his fire, to his hunger, that she would be a vessel to poison and injure the innocent. Abuse victims can become part of a cycle of pain, spinning wildly out of control and abusing others to relieve or destroy their own feelings of helplessness and misery. Laura was the strongest character on the show because she recognized this and resisted.
They wanted her. They wanted Laura. But she was strong. She fought him. She wouldn't let him in. She said she'd die before she'd let him. Then they made me kill her.
The days leading up to her death are portrayed sensitively in the film Fire Walk with Me. Laura is still leading her dual life of pleasant suburban idol on one hand and dismal, drug-fueled mania on the other. Sarah Palmer, Maddie, and Laura are all known to be sensitive in some way to the spiritual creatures of Ghostwood Forest. Laura spends half her time in the movie confronting weird, hallucinatory people and places. She also comes uncomfortably close to Bob seizing control of her and harming her loved ones. We don't know if this was how she interacted with the world typically, or if she was witnessing the lodge and its spooky residents only because she was so close to her death. The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, written by David Lynch's daughter, suggests that Laura saw strange things with increasing frequency as she approached her date with death. Perhaps compelled by the drugs she was taking, Laura was in something of a stupor. Just a few days before her death, Laura discovered the secret of who had been raping her for 6 years. In the most sickening reveal in TV history, we learn that she was being assaulted and brutalized by none other than her father, Leland Palmer. Leland was, like his daughter, an abuse victim. He had been attacked and used when he was a child by the vicious killer spirit Bob. What part the real Leland, rather than his inhabiting spirit Bob, played in the molestation and murder is unclear. Perhaps he was an innocent victim, or perhaps he was partially responsible. Laura's home life seems grim and oppressive in the film Fire Walk with Me. Her father Leland harangues and torments her, even sending her off crying and leaving her fearing for her life on multiple occasions. She seems terrorized and miserable because of his domineering patriarchal control. The news that her own father was tormenting her finally broke Laura. She returned to sniffing cocaine, prostitution, and once again went into the dark woods with felon Leo Johnson. She wrote in her diary that it was her last night alive, but she went up anyway.
Laura Palmer did not commit suicide.
No. But maybe she allowed herself to be killed.
It was there that her suicidally risky behavior finally ended her life. Bob found Laura as she knew he would, dragged her to an abandoned train car in the woods, and brutally murdered her. Bob tried one last time to let her live. He gave her a mirror and showed himself inhabiting her body. Laura was just a child, but she knew the horror that was to come. She lived the past 6 years in absolute fear of a madman and suffered more than most people do in a lifetime. But in the final moment of her life, love won out. Love of Bobby and James, love of her best friend Donna, love of her mother, and most especially love of herself. She had a chance, one last chance to survive, but she would have to become the monster she hated. To paraphrase Nietzsche, she gazed into the abyss, but the abyss did not gaze back into her. Under the most awful threats and violence, she rejected Bob's offer of infestation. She loved the good Laura, the pure Laura, the part of herself that was strong, happy, and wanted to do good by everyone. In Laura's secret diary, she often speaks of struggling to be good and be kind to others. Bob seems already to be taking a hold of her, and that she couldn't stand herself when she hurt others as she was increasingly wont to do. She paid the price for choosing to keep her soul rather than gain the whole world. Unwilling to be a vessel for hate, Laura was brutally killed by Bob. Laura Palmer remains one of the most enigmatic, interesting, and important characters in TV history, and she almost never appeared alive on a TV show. Laura's story is part of the first chinks in the armor of the suburban paradise that was such a major part of U.S. thinking since the end of the Second World War, that we could escape from the violence and tumult of the inner cities to a peaceful, happy land away from them. Part of what Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks did was shatter that illusion and show that the darkness inside of human beings goes wherever we go. And there is just as much terror, violence, and fear in rural and suburban areas as there is in urban life. Laura was crucially destroyed not by an alien outside force, but by something lurking at the very heart of her life. Something evil and despicable right under her nose. Looking back, it seems shocking that a character like Laura was ever allowed on TV. She was a smart, capable, sexually confident, drug-addicted young woman and still a teenager. She was flawed and complex. There were no pat answers for Laura. No easy explanations of virtue or villainy, little comprehension of her actions ultimately. They shifted as often as a real person's. She grew with time and evolved into something better than they began. Every young female character in TV in the 21st century has been impacted by her in some way. Careening between societal expectations of purity, biological longing for sexual experimentation, and the terror of violence and abuse are still things modern TV is coming to grips with, and it's something we are all still fascinated by. Just a few months ago, in March 2017, a new television show hit Netflix called 13 Reasons Why. The main female character, Hannah Baker, is also a teenager who struggles with sex, public opinion, assault, and a terrible suicidal ideation. The entire premise of the series is that she leaves behind cassette tapes explaining her innermost thoughts and secrets. Listening to secret cassette tapes left behind by a suicidal dead girl was featured 25 years before on Twin Peaks. Laura is probably to this day the most complex, most confusing, and best-written character on the entire series. The mystery of her death, and even more so the mystery of her life, is endlessly fascinating, leaving new generations of fans spellbound decades later. That's quite an achievement for a character that died before the show even began. Laura's fate at the end of the series is a little more mysterious, but it's Twin Peaks, so that's to be expected. We know that some iteration of her is in the Lodge. Some version of her interacts with Agent Cooper after her death when he enters the Black Lodge in the series finale. She also, according to Leland, is waiting to greet her father after he died. Is Laura's soul trapped in the Lodge? Is that what happens when your pain and suffering is sprayed on the floor by Bob? Similar to how Josie appears trapped somehow by the spirits? There is some sort of doppelganger version of Laura and others inside the Lodge. I prefer, just on my own feelings, that Laura is in a better, happy place after her death. The last image we ever see of her in the film Fire Walk with Me. She's inside the Lodge and she starts crying, but it's not a sad cry. She's happy, she's laughing and crying at the same time. This is just after her death, and we can't really know her feelings here. I like to think that she's finally at peace after a horrifying, torturous life. Laura is gone, but she never became the monster she could have. She never had her virtue stolen away by Bob the Killer and turned into his pawn. She may have lost her life, but she held on to her soul, and she's now at peace. Hello, my name is Michael. Please like this video if you liked it, and please leave a comment telling me what your thoughts are on Laura Palmer, one of the best characters ever on TV. I'm going to do a reaction series after each episode of the new series of Twin Peaks comes out, including this first one on Sunday, May 21st. I originally wanted to get the videos out the night of the show being released, but that sounds a little crazy, and I'll probably be uploading them on the day after, on Monday the 22nd. So if you want to see more character breakdowns and those reactions to the new series, please subscribe. I'm also linked here 2 of my other character breakdown videos, so please check them out. Bye-bye!